And a number of countries reportedly reaching out to negotiate tariffs with President Trump over the weekend. Joining us now with the latest, President Trump's senior trade and manufacturing advisor, Peter Navarro. And given the backdrop, Peter, of what we've seen, the tumult in the markets, and the S&P could theoretically be in bear market territory. And I know you make the distinction between Main Street and Wall Street, but obviously they're interconnected. So to get the real story on how many countries are calling and on whether the president is actually agreeable is important, because we've heard all these countries are making the phone call, but then we hear that maybe the president isn't interested at this point. Can you clear that up?
Sure, Joe, but let me first take you back in a time capsule, because this feels a lot like the day after the election in 2016. And I don't know if you remember that day, but I was on the set with you. The futures were dead red down. And I made the prediction that the Dow would hit 25,000. And Andrew's head exploded. It's like, wow, but you correctly pointed out that wasn't that heavy a lift. And we did hit that, not in 4 years, but in less than 2 years. And what I'm seeing, Joe, is a beautiful situation where we will hit 50,000 on the Dow. And we're going to have a broad-based recovery in the S&P 500. The market's trying to find its bottom now. The thing I would say to retail investors is don't get panicked out by all of this. And what the president could have added to that fine truth was the fact that the biggest tax cut in American history, the broadest base tax cut in American history, is coming within a matter of months. So any discussion of recession seems silly when you factor that in. Plus, the Fed is not going to do its job, but the long bond is doing it. We're lowering our oil prices, which is just amazing.
Right.
And here's the one other thing I want to say macro-wise, Joe, because look, this is all about people worried about global recession. That's what they're worried about. The restructuring that's going to happen, Joe, globally, is going to start with China and Vietnam and Germany, heavily export-dependent countries. They're going to have to engage significant fiscal stimulus to reorient their economy. So that thing is going to go on. In the meantime,
Peter,
we're going to boom
bigger.
here.
I think they're much bigger than most people thought. And I think from policy institutes on both sides of the aisle, the methodology that was used has been universally derided as being non-serious. I don't know whether you know exactly who came up with the formula, but it allowed you to at least characterize most of these countries as being their tariffs well above the reality of the situation, so that when you say that we're going to do half on them, it was much higher than anyone anticipated. And I think you'd have to concede that this was not the market reaction you were looking for. There's a way of maybe incrementally trying to accomplish some of the things that the president wants to do in a reasonable, serious way. And this just almost across the board has caused what you're seeing in the stock market, and a lot of head scratching and head shaking on whether anyone really knows what they're doing in this case, Peter.
All right, well,
let's acknowledge that.
Sure. No, I can't, because here's what I'm seeing. You're throwing a lot of stuff at me. First of all, the methodology was perfectly sound. It was done by the Council of Economic Advisors based on long-term studies that are in the academic literature. And the people taking pot shots at us are the same people that always take pot shots
the American
at us.
Enterprise Institute, Peter.
Of course. Joe, come on. The American Enterprise Institute has been against it.
Conservative, Larry Lindsay.
Let's not get buried down in those weeds now. You asked me a serious question. Was the president willing to negotiate? What we have here is a national emergency based on massive chronic trade deficits caused by systematically higher tariffs and non-tariff barriers. So when you ask if we're willing to negotiate, the president will always listen. But let's understand what the problem is. When you have a country like Vietnam, let's take Vietnam. When they come to us and say, we'll go to zero tariffs, that means nothing to us, because it's the non-tariff cheating that matters. Let's do Vietnam, Joe. They sell us $15 for every $1 we sell them. About $5 of that 15 is China transshipping to Vietnam to evade their tariffs.
What is Vietnam?
what does Vietnam do? They dump into our markets, killing our shrimpers, our people who make metal brackets, kitchen cabinets, agricultural products. They engage in intellectual property theft. They have the biggest number of cases aside from China at the Department of Commerce on the dumping. So the point is, anybody who wants to come to talk to us about lowering your non-tariff barriers. Vietnam has a 10% VAT. Europe has a 19% VAT. We can't compete against that. We have tried
help us
at the World
understand.
Trade Organization to get, Andrew, let me just make this point. We have tried at the World Trade Organization since the 1970s to get VAT tax relief, and they've told us no every single time. We've won case after case at the World Trade Organization on things like our agricultural products, pork, beef, and other, and corn,
Peter,
and they
I think
just
the
blow
thing
us
we're all
off.
trying